New Zealand has one of the most enviable reputations in the world. Clean environment, stable democracy, high quality of life. For decades, it was the kind of place people moved to, not away from. So why, in 2025, did a record 72,000 New Zealand citizens leave the country? The largest net loss of citizens ever recorded in a single calendar year. Nearly 40% of those who left were under 30. And why, even as that number was breaking records, emigration of New Zealand citizens to OECD countries jumped 24% in 2025 alone, with the majority heading to Australia, the UK, and the United States. This video breaks down exactly who is likely to thrive in New Zealand over the coming years, and who needs to seriously consider making a move before 2027. No political agenda, just an honest look at the numbers and the direction things are heading. Here's the first thing to understand. New Zealand is no longer one unified economic experience. Depending on where you sit in society, what you own, who you work for, how you earn, your future in this country looks completely different. The economists have noticed. Westpac's senior economists flagged that the cycle of departures reflects the cooling economy and fewer job opportunities in New Zealand. The primary drivers are soaring housing costs, stagnant wages, and rising unemployment. And for every returning Kiwi, 3 are departing. So the real question isn't, should I leave New Zealand? The real question is, who are you in New Zealand? Because the answer changes everything. Let's go through each group. Start with property owners and investors, particularly those who entered the market before 2016. In 2025, around 28% of all residential properties sold in New Zealand went for over $1 million. That is the market these people are sitting inside. While national property values remain almost 17% below their post-COVID peak, the market has stabilized and mortgage repayments now absorb around 44% of median household income, down from a peak of 57% in 2022. For those who already own and aren't servicing a new mortgage at today's prices, that correction has made their asset base more attractive to yield-seeking buyers, not less. Immigration continues to sustain rental demand. The highest weekly rent in Auckland reached 625 New Zealand dollars per week as of late 2025. If someone is sitting on equity and drawing rental income from that kind of market, the system is functioning in their favor. For this group, there is no urgent reason to leave. The numbers work. The same broadly applies to those employed within the public sector. And New Zealand's public sector is substantial. The public sector employs around 477,400 people, approximately 19.5% of New Zealand's total workforce. Within that system, salaries keep pace. The average annual salary for public servants reached $103,300 in 2025, a 4.6% increase on the previous year compared to 4% growth in the private sector over the same period. And the total base salary cost for the entire public service? $6.5 billion annually. Even through the government's own cost-cutting drive, the machine sustains itself. Those inside it are protected in ways that most private sector workers simply are not. For this group, staying makes sense. There is a third category worth noting: businesses and operators running services that are effectively funded by the government. Disability support providers, certain healthcare operators, construction companies aligned with public infrastructure contracts. New Zealand's disability support sector alone is a significant economic ecosystem. The government allocated $1.1 billion over 5 years in Budget 2024 just to ensure Waikaha, the Ministry of Disabled People, can continue delivering critical disability support services on top of its existing more than $2.2 billion per annum investment in disability services. For 2025/26, the government plans to spend $2.594 billion on supporting disabled people, $233 million more than the previous year. About 1 in 6 New Zealanders, or 17% of the population, are disabled. That is a large and growing market serviced almost entirely by government funding. For anyone operating within that ecosystem, there is real business opportunity in New Zealand right now. Now here is where the picture changes, significantly. Take a wage earner on $120,000 to $150,000 a year. That sounds like solid money. After tax, take-home sits somewhere around $85,000 to $95,000. From that, rent in Auckland for a basic 2-bedroom property runs $650 to $750 per week, approximately $35,000 a year, before a single other expense is paid. New Zealand's grocery costs are among the highest in the developed world relative to median wages. A modest weekly shop for a small family runs $300 to $400. Annually, that's another $16,000 to $20,000 gone. Add transport. A car, insurance, registration, and petrol adds $8,000 to $10,000 a year minimum. Add childcare, some of the most expensive in the OECD. Add private healthcare because the public system is under severe pressure. What's left? Realistically, $20,000 to $30,000 per year, if nothing goes wrong. Now consider what a house deposit actually requires. New Zealand has one of the highest house price-to-income ratios in the world. Auckland's value-to-income ratio sits at 7.9, its lowest in a decade, and yet that still means the median Auckland home costs nearly 8 times annual household income. A 20% deposit on an $800,000 entry-level property means $160,000 needs to be saved. At $25,000 a year under ideal conditions, that is 6 to 7 years of perfect discipline just to reach the starting line. For most households, the reality is longer. The arithmetic does not work, and nothing in the current trajectory improves that equation. For those relying on government support, the data is not encouraging. As of December 2025, 427,236 people, 13.2% of the working-age population, were on a main benefit, with 223,512 on job seeker support alone. Yet the system supporting them is shrinking under fiscal pressure. Hardship support payments dropped by $180 million in 2025, grants fell 11%, and the dollar value of payments reduced by 18%. The Salvation Army recorded 45,825 benefit sanctions in 2025, nearly double the 25,329 recorded the year prior. More people are being cut off or penalized within the system, not fewer. The fiscal pressure will only intensify as superannuation, already consuming 1/4 of core government expenditure, continues growing alongside an aging population. Meanwhile, the Digital Identity Services Trust Framework Act 2023 and the government's RealMe system are fundamentally reshaping how services are accessed. Major infrastructure transitions are planned through 2025 to 2027. For anyone depending on these systems, access is becoming more conditional, more monitored, and more digitally controlled. For entrepreneurs and small business owners, the picture deserves particular attention. New Zealand consistently ranks well in global ease of doing business indices. Company registration is fast. The legal system is stable. On paper, it looks like a reasonable environment. In practice, the operating costs tell a different story. The company tax rate sits at 28%. Trusts pay a flat 33% on retained income. Add GST at 15%, ACC levies averaging 1.6% of liable earnings, and the compliance burden of employment law, and the effective tax take from a small business's revenue is substantial before the owner draws a salary. According to MBIE, small businesses spend an average of 70 hours per year on tax compliance alone, time that costs money and produces nothing. Compliance costs in New Zealand fall with disproportionate severity on smaller businesses, and the severity of that regressiveness has increased over time. The smaller the operation, the harder the compliance burden hits relative to revenue. Compare that to jurisdictions where small business tax sits in the low single digits and where employment compliance is straightforward. In those environments, a business owner can fail, absorb the cost, and try something new within weeks. In New Zealand's current structure, a failed venture sets a business back 6 to 12 months, and the following period is spent simply recovering to zero, not building forward. That cycle discourages experimentation and compounds over time into a structural reason to operate elsewhere. So who should seriously be considering leaving New Zealand before 2027? Wage earners under 40 who have not entered the property market and for whom the savings math does not produce a viable path to ownership. Entrepreneurs and small business owners whose growth is being structurally capped by tax burden and compliance cost. And anyone whose financial goals, building wealth, building a business, building a future for a family, are not being supported by the current economic environment. The data is already reflecting this. Of the 72,000 New Zealand citizens who departed in 2025, annual departures exceeded 1,000 in every single age group from 18 to 39. 56% went to Australia. These are not retirees seeking warmer weather. These are working-age people running the numbers and deciding the deal no longer adds up. The 2027 timeframe matters because the structural change is already underway. Digital ID rollout, expanded financial monitoring, continued housing affordability pressure on wage earners, and an expanding public sector cost base are in the process of becoming embedded. The public service workforce grew 27% in the 5 years to 2023, and the cost base that supports it continues to draw from the same tax pool that wage earners and small businesses fund. Once these structures are embedded, they are significantly harder to step back from. New Zealand is not a failing state. It is a country with genuine strengths. But those strengths are increasingly concentrated in the hands of those who already own a piece of it. A recent national survey found almost half of non-homeowners had given up hope of ever owning a home. That is not a minor statistic. That is half of a generation recalibrating their expectations downward. The question worth sitting with is a simple one. Is the New Zealand on offer today the one planned for? And if the answer is no, what comes next? If this raised questions, whether that's about where people are moving, how they're structuring their finances abroad, or what the real options look like, subscribe. That's exactly what this channel covers. Drop the situation in the comments. Staying or making a plan? The world is a bigger place than most people realize until they go and see it.